So status Orchard 1, 7 days, PRs, fixing duplicate media items. Hermes fixed the bug when you select multiple times a media item. We merge his PR with localization for the media library. So now you can localize media items, and he made a demo last week. Everything worked. He reacted to all the PR comments, so that we merged it in dev. 110x, we merged that. Possible no reference exception in the indexing task. So if you have a kind of corrupted database, you could have the ref exception with the ContentItemRecors equal null. It's a bug that we had a long time ago, but if the database is corrupted, this line will expose it. So it won't happen again with new versions, but you could have an old version that you update it to 110x. That's the idea. So it's catching it. And BooleanFilterForm, it's adding an ID so that you can do things with it. That's it. This is the only one that was missing an ID. So that's it for Orchard 1. Orchard core. Seven days. So YesSql on the workflow. Chantieri has been working on background tasks, doing things. I have to check. I already have some notes to make background tasks better, so I'm not really focusing on that for now. Yeah. So we'll see later. Workflow, updating fluid and YesSql. I've done so many fixes in fluid and YesSql this week. It's crazy. I will go on them after because I did that multiple times. Improve content types. This is YesSql and workflow. This is Chantieri on Visual Studio improvements. Antoine merged Bootstrap for final release changes in dev. So we have all the things updated. You see now it's v4.0.0, no more beta. So that's good, and some changes apparently. So, well, this is, yeah, that's fine. This is a PR. This is new because improvement in YesSql to support limit and offset in SQL queries, and there is new things. Maybe I could show you how it works now. So I worked on the SQL queries improvement. So I fixed this issue. Let me filter on the dev branch because I had too much noise. What is that? Branches dev. Why can't I see the new things? That's weird. Origin dev? No, I don't get it. I don't know. Okay, so I'll go up here, dev, parent vs formatting none, remove. Chantieri improved the targets and props files so that Visual Studio doesn't mess up with the projects anymore when we copy paste views from between projects. So the files are cleaner now automatically. He's also working on reusing view components across modules. Updating fluid and updating fluid again because I didn't push on NuGet before updating, that's bad. Fixing table prefix regression, there was a bug due to my changes in YesSql. Update README, this is more documentation on theming the navigation on the admin or on the front end if you use the admin navigation module on the front end. This is adding limit an offset, which I will show not already that, but I will show SQL queries differently. If I can do that, does anyone have other demos?
Well, I have some updates to share with you on the workflows module. It's things that we discussed the other
Yep,
day.
we discussed. I have that and your updates. You want to start?
Yep. Okay, cool. So, number of things. Talked about separating those buttons. So now we have a separate add task, add event.
Cool.
We also talked about a global filter. So this filter now applies to everything. So it will just disregard this thing. There's also now a separation. Well, yeah, we talked about this little event versus task. So now visually, when it's an event, you see a little lightning bulb. So it's unrelated to lightning bulb here. This can be any other type of icon. And then when you add an event, that is not a start event. It has a blue color just to make it more apparent that it's different. That's just experimental. We can change it back to green. Cool. But at this way, it's a little bit more visible that it's an event.
Is that a CSS class?
Yep. Okay. It's yeah. It's there's two places where this needs to be changed. There's the SAS file, and then there's the JS-Plumb initialization script, and that doesn't know anything about that class file, so it's hard-coded in the TypeScript file. We could parameterize it, of course, or we could even put it in some variable, but not sure how to put it in a distinct place.
That's weird that you have to change JS-Plumb for that, but it's not worth for parameterizing. Just.
That's what I figured. Yeah. Yeah, there's JS-Plumb has for these little bulbs here, for these connectors. That's what you need to configure.
Oh, I didn't see. I saw the line.
The border
around.
is in class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see the line of the transition. Okay.
And I added. Well, I renamed the. Branch and merge activities into fork and join. Plus, I added an option to join where you can specify mode, and then you can either wait all activities to complete or wait any. And that's useful, for example, when you're awaiting two events that are forked.
So when you have two options, you can use radio buttons, no?
Yeah, maybe that's better then.
And then you can see without clicking what options you have if there are not that many. And
yeah, good point.
And they are not dynamic also, so I mean they're static.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. I'll make that radio buttons. That's that. It's been implemented, which hasn't been implemented anywhere else, and I found a neat little thing because if you look at the HTML structure, that this form is outside of this form, and it has to be because there's some other form already, the search form here, that is its own form. Maybe there is a way to enclose everything inside a form, but there was some reason that didn't make it practical. But you can actually specify on a button, you can specify a form attribute. It's not supported in IE. No, maybe in ads, but not the other versions, but it's supported in all other browsers. So you can have a button that submits a different form that's not the parent of this button.
We can do a jQuery class for that.
Yeah, well, you don't have to. This is just native browser feature, and of course you can use JavaScript. Okay. Well, you can. with IE, we can just patch it up and then provide a JavaScript that
it works in Edge.
Test. I haven't tested it in Edge.
That's a question. Okay.
I will try it. But anyway, I thought that was clever. Source works. You can do bulk edits. There's only delete now, and I suppose that's the only thing that will be there because we don't have drafts. Maybe in the future we'll have drafts.
You should only show the bulk actions button if something is selected.
Oh yeah, so it should be hidden. You mean if
yep.
If nothing's selected? That makes sense. Okay.
And then Bertrand will do an option to select everything because he did that in Orchard 1, so he knows how to do that.
That would be a good addition, definitely. I added a timer activity.
Good.
However, there's a cat, and I'll show you. And I probably need some help fixing that. So there's associated with a separate feature. Oh, it's not occurring. Maybe in a few seconds. But now you can create a new timer. Oh.
I didn't see what. Okay, what did you do?
Oh, I just created a new workflow definition. So this is an empty canvas, and I'll add a timer. So this can also be this is a very simplistic UI. This supports cron expressions, but I'm gonna turn this into a nice UI.
Timer is an event.
Yes.
Okay. If you manage to delete, okay, good. You made a background task then?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
That will check for every timer in.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
And that works for start activities as well as suspended workflows. So it works in both scenarios, and I think it's optimized. It's of course the background task executes every minute. I should optimize it a little bit further by maybe maintaining a dictionary, a cast dictionary of workflows that match the query, so that it doesn't have to query the database every minute. But that's an optimization to be done. And this UI, I will make it much better, so you can choose actually whether you want to do something weekly or every other week. Very similar to existing UIs that deal with cron expressions. For now, the simplest test is just to use 5 stars, which means it will execute every minute. And I'm baffled that it doesn't show the error, because for some reason, maybe if I save this, but what happened is that there's some sort of service, and I think it's the content manager that's being injected into a bunch of activity classes that is being had into memory, because I was getting a very similar issue that I showed with the when I was working on the content handler events, making them async. And it happened as soon as I enabled the feature, but we'll see. I also added a log activity, so you can add logging information. I'm just putting it to error now because that's the threshold, the log level set in configuration.
So this is starting to be low level, but this is fine. The next level won't be that fine.
Yeah, so the next level, it's actually I have it here. So this is now gonna kick off. Unfortunately, I can't show you the instances because of this little bug in YesSql, but that's being fixed, I've been told.
It's, you know what? I have the commit ready. I just need to push the commit. I was just waiting for YesSql to be a NuGet.
Yep. Okay, cool. That's great. Anyway, so this will now generate a workflow instance every minute. However, I updated the workflow manager to have 2 ways or 2 modes, if you will, to signal to trigger an event. So the default one will just generate new workflow instances as it matches starting activity events, but it also has a mode that it will only spawn a new instance if there isn't already an instance of that workflow. So that's what I use here. So it's,
well, can't you do it globally and not just for this event, but like having a singleton workflow instance? Like on the definition, you can have an option that says only one can run at a time, and that will work for everything.
Oh, that's good, because then you can configure it and define the behavior you prefer.
Yeah, it's just sense. A checkbox, and it works everywhere, and that totally makes sense. In many workflows, you want only one to be run, and so.
Yeah, it's true. Right now, it's hard-coded in the background task, the timer background task, that will just call that other method on the workflow manager. But that makes sense to make it configurable on the workflow definition. Yeah, okay.
The next option is to have an activity which is just stopping a workflow based on the condition. Well, the condition is a script or a condition activity, but one other activity will be stop workflow, so that you could start on the start event with the condition, and then after branch to a stop workflow. You see? So you could also implement a fallback.
So you would implement it as part of the workflow?
If you want, yeah. So the singleton activity and the workflow definition makes sense to me. It's a simple way to have a single instance for a definition, but you might want to be able to stop a workflow anytime for any reason, like someone is already running, or it's been too long, or whatever, and have a stop workflow activity. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yep, there should be an activity that allows you to stop the workflow instance.
Cancel, exit, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what about well, currently when a workflow finishes execution, that instance is deleted from the database. And I was thinking, what if you want to see a history of workflows that have executed?
Could make sense, yeah. Like published or active or not, whatever, yeah. Stopped, and then you keep it, and you can prune it if you want, or filter them.
Exactly. So do you think that should be an option on the workflow definition?
Definition, same thing, yeah. Like we do for the versions. We can version or not content items. Maybe you want to historize workflow instances, and then you check a box if you want to keep the history. That would make sense.
Exactly. Great.
And as long as we have bulk actions on the instances to delete the old ones if we want. And,
we have them, but we don't have the select the check all button, but that will be added.
Yeah. Check all page.
Sorry.
It will be a page, but.
Yeah, and maybe some filters, so you can maybe specify a range, because potentially it can be a very long list.
Yeah, but maybe we'll think about an option to delete everything, like Google Gmail is doing. It's just there is select all, and when you select all, you can have an alert saying do you actually want to select everything and not just this one. And this way there could be an option that is sent in the post value that shows that it's everything and not just a list of IDs, like a star. And then based on the star, you say, okay, he wants to delete everything, so you will issue a delete everything on the server. That might be useful. But yeah, don't have to do that now, as long as we can see and check.
Yeah, I will add it to the list with future improvements, but we'll have at least we'll have support for keeping the workflow history around, and then you can always log delete it. That's already there. So then timer. I removed the what's that?
You showed
the log activity. Yeah, I showed the log. I removed the script syntax option, so now it's always just JavaScript.
Thank you.
So that also means that if you if you add a script, I didn't want to show the script actually, but email. So maybe you remember I had these little add-ons showing the syntax, so I removed that as well. So now it's just part of the the note here, and as you said, we should add a link to documentation once that's there.
With samples, people will see samples of emails and they will copy, paste, and adapt. That's what it is. It's like Stack Overflow, but for email templating.
Okay, so try cats.
Boom.
But before we get to that, I improved the admin routes a little bit, so that's just a little bit of cleanup. And yeah, and so the indices, they no longer have record IDs, document IDs, but just application generated unique IDs, similar to content items, but not the same. I didn't look actually at the ID generation of content IDs. Maybe I'll adopt that as well. Right now I'm just generating a new GUID and then, but without the hyphens.
We see at the top local ID.
Yeah, it's similar, but it's not the same.
Okay. That's the editor. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. This is local for the editor. So there was a discussion on Gitter regarding try catch and throw activities. So here, let me get rid of this guy. This is a very simple example that's also useless. But the idea is that what you can do with a workflow now is that the workflow can execute, and let's say an exception is thrown here. The workflow manager will go back each step that it took until it finds a activity that can handle the exception. And then in this case, the try catch activity you can configure which exceptions it can handle. If none matches, it will continue walking up. So I think that's pretty nifty. And then, of course, you can execute some branch of execution here.
Every time you show me something more, every time I hate it more.
Really?
So first you mentioned try catch, then I didn't like it. Then you showed me the image, and I saw the system invalid operation exception. I'm like, WTF? And now you are showing me the list of people can type an exception inside.
Well, don't be.
I love you. I hate it.
Yeah, thank you. So the UI obviously that needs work, but that's the case with many activities that I want to make the UI much more user friendly because nobody will guess. And I get the point that this is just for programmers. Non-developers will not even know what exception types are there.
They should not do it. If they need a try catch and exceptions, they should not do a workflow. They should go to the module and create a module and done and catch an event and do anything they want. They should not do a workflow.
Yes. Yeah. So we discussed that on Gitter as well. That
even if they can, you can say, well, they can if they want. I'm like, I don't even want them to be able to do that because it's just a trap to have complex workflow and people complaining of the module. And the more you get, the more you give, the more they will want, and then I think it's crazy. I
think it's very powerful to have these low-level activities that allows you to implement business logic or very advanced logic and persist this logic as data.
Look at Bertrand's comment. Look at Bertrand's comment. I didn't say anything. Okay. Look at Bertrand's comment. Individual activities can have their own error conditions if they want, and associated connection points. Exactly what I told you on Gitter.
Yep, that's the same comment.
Exception handling comes out of the sandbox. Good. And you might have a global error endpoint that you want to plug an activity to or a set of activity to say when something irrecoverable happens, then run that, like log something or send an email or do something, but not try catch, because then people will just wrap every workflow with a try catch expecting an exception to be thrown. We should expect that no exception can be thrown from an activity. We should have an error endpoint if an activity can go into error, okay, or fail, and you want to know when this one failed. Like notify, we don't care about an error when notification could be described. Send email, yes, we want to know when an email could not be sent, because you might want to retry n times, or you might want to log it, or to do something different. But each activity could or could not have an error endpoint outcome, I mean, and a global optional error in the workflow, like something bad happened, but I would not even expect that.
Yeah, it makes sense because it does simplify the UI greatly for users. Regarding that global event handler or error handler, you mentioned that, somebody else mentioned it as well. So
no, like when you have the activity that says starts, that you could have an activity that says on error, and that is read, and then it's triggered when there is an irrecoverable error in the workflow, if people want to handle it. And
yeah, but as you said, none of the activities should actually throw an exception, or well, if an exception is expected, then it should provide it as an outcome.
Yeah. And if there is an exception, again, that's an irrecoverable error that could be handled at the workflow level by a custom activity that intercepts error. If you expect that, but you should not even expect that.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe, well, I'll get rid of the try catch and throw, because I've given it some thought and it makes sense.
It's nice technically, but it's dangerous operationally, because people will use it, and that's or will ask about it and will want you to fix it, and they should not do that. That's the opposite goal of the workflow. So it's UI that doesn't need code. Here it's code. That's
Yep. Well, that was my my vision, or part of my vision is to allow you to do really low level stuff, but also of course have a good library of high level activities. But you raise a valid point.
You know what could be interesting also is to have a code-based workflow definition, so that the module can come with predefined workflows. Well, you could have a recipe that defines it, right? But you could also imagine that a class could contain a workflow, and then it will be available as a workflow definition, and it will be enabled and then run some things and appear as workflow instances in the release.
Yeah, exactly. Because that would also, for example, instead of having to hard code.
But at the same time, it's an activity. It's an activity. You could call it an activity and then make it available. So as Bertrand mentioned that multiple times already, that an activity should be able to run a workflow. Like you could have a workflow as an activity. So you could have an activity that is coded to be a complex logic and returns an outcome. And stops and waits for some things, okay? But you could also have an activity that runs a different workflow, or an inner workflow that might be also part of the workflow definition, but as a sub workflow, like an activity containing a workflow. So when you double click, for instance, or when you edit the activity, you get the workflow editor. I don't know if you see what I mean, but
well, maybe not for this one. Yeah. So, I have it on my backlog. Yeah, so an activity to invoke another activity, and that workflow to be invoked, that's its own workflow definition in the system, right? So you would, when you added the workflow activity, you suggest maybe that will take you to its editor, or should it allow you to choose from a drop-down list the available workflow definitions?
Yeah, both. Yeah, you can have two activities: one that will trigger another workflow definition to start a dependent workflow instance, and one that you could say, oh, I want to, because when you have big workflows, you might want to separate them into smaller workflows. So then when you double click on one, you will get the same editor, but for this, I assume you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
Subsections of a workflow. And again, that's an advanced scenario. You don't have to do that now, but that's a possibility too. That should be a possibility to do.
Yeah. I actually I miss that functionality sometimes in Orchard 1 with the workflows module, but we'll definitely have it here. But yeah, not in the first release, but I have it on the backlog. Okay.
Yeah. So if you can have
so no coded workflows, but if we have
an activity is a coded workflow, so
yeah, exactly. So
what we need is an error outcome for some of the activities. Maybe it has to be hard coded. Maybe it has to be hard coded in activities like supports error, something like that, and then you will always render an endpoint that is on error, and that is red maybe, that so we can see it, and then it will be triggered when there is an error, or the activity can say I went on error, not like a standard outcome, or maybe like a standard outcome but with some metadata that will appear differently on the editor.
Oh, okay. So an activity wouldn't have to implement all of that. It would just implement a particular interface, and then the workflow manager knows how to deal with that.
That, or it returns also an error outcome, and the logic tells, oh, run error, or like if as a true and false outcomes. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it has also error outcome, and when the user plugs an error, the activity will call your outcome if there was an exception. It won't throw the exception. It will catch anything that can go wrong. And like the email, when you send the email, you try catch, or you look at the email was sent, and if it was not sent in a timeout, then you say, okay, I will stop that and call the error outcome. If nothing is plugged, fine. But if something is plugged,
this is all within that activity, right? I'm just trying to. It's
inside activity. Each activity has its own logic, yes.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing shared. It's just each activity just it's up to the implementer of the activity to decide whether to return an error on its outcome or not.
Error is kind of particular because it can be displayed in the UI differently. So maybe just by naming convention, if the outcome is called error, then you can render it as red and not as green. I don't know if it's doable. You see? So just by convention, if you have an outcome called error, then it will be displayed differently.
Yep. Yeah, I'll try a few things, but that sounds easy enough.
Well, that's very cool. Yeah. Again, this is great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will do those things. I will get rid of the try catch throw. I'll add some items to the backlog in terms of error handling. Maybe we need to draw a line in terms of at which point we want to get it into dev. But maybe you want to do some more.
Stop adding things.
Yeah.
Because if the engine is ready, put the engine in dev and then create other PRs for other activities. Stop adding more stuff because you will never get to the end. Like you had try catch, open new discussion, and then you never stop.
Yeah, definitely.
That's good. You have so much time to spend on that. That's awesome. But if
I'm having a lot of fun doing
milestones.
Yeah, so that's what I have this Trello board for here. So I have a backlog. I have a to-do for first release that's currently empty. So I'm awaiting feedback on the PR. If I don't get anything, I'm gonna keep this clean, and I will do some more testing and fix any issues, but I won't add more functionality.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I want to see this demo where you push on GitHub and it creates a content item. Next week I want to see the demo. You have everything in place, I'm sure.
Yep. Yeah, that's going to be a cool demo.
Yeah, because GitHub, you define a webhook that connects to Orcahrd, and it will send a signature that you can check from the workflow also, and that's nice. In ASP.NET Core, by the way, they are adding a feature called webhooks, which is implementing custom actions that will recognize the signature of well-known webhooks like GitHub, Salesforce, Stripe, all these webhooks that the services can call into, and they will provide you with the parameters from these webhooks. That could be a module, an ID for a module later, that provide these webhooks, HTTP webhooks, but that plugged already for understanding Stripe events or GitHub events. So you get the values from the event directly in your workflow activity, and then you can run a script or other things when you are called into. Okay, so that might be an interesting extension to HTTP hooks. HTTP requests. You call them HTTP requests. I call them webhooks, but So
well, we already have HTTP requests, so you can just add an HTTP request event.
I know,
and then
but I'm saying is maybe you need a Salesforce or GitHub push activity event so that it will only react to the GitHub one, so you don't have to configure it, it's pre-configured, and it will add all the properties of the GitHub push into your workflow, so you have access to them from any user activity. Exactly. So you don't have to look at the request or know the request. It's a GitHub push done. Yeah, okay? Exactly. Great. Or a Salesforce whatever event, or a Azure Flow whatever event, or whatever service. So that's what MVC adds also, some signatures for your actions when they are called to parse automatically the values or the JSON object that the webhook is sending. That's the idea. So later.
So that webhook support thing in ASP.NET Core, that's upcoming?
Yep, in 2.1 or 2.2, I'm not sure. And but it's just a list of JSON document with models that will be bound automatically, and you could do the same thing. It's just I can talk offline about it and I can show you. But that would be super useful too. If we can, let's see them as connectors to external services, and from external services, because then you could also the same thing that sends a custom GitHub request, because you know exactly what payload GitHub wants, so you can create an activity that takes parameters that will format the payload for the user. So the user doesn't have to go into an HTTP request and create a liquid template to create a JSON and so on. We talk about it offline. I'll show you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you. Anyone has comments to do? Okay. So I will share my screen again. It's not responding, it's weird. I'm clicking. So YesSql is a NuGet now. I can push, but I can't open Visual Studio. Oh yeah, I can now. Core. So people are chatting on Gitter instead of coming to the meeting. Sipke, you will ping them on Gitter because I know it's open, and we tell them that we can see their notification on my screen, and they should be in the meeting instead.
I'm going there right now.
If not, just listening. Okay, I'm referencing the latest YesSql version. That's why I think it restarted. Just need to hit the play button. It should be quick. It's a good machine. So yeah, this while it's building this week, many improvements and bugs on Fluid and YesSql, just for Orcahrd. Issues, so for Fluid mostly from Chris. Let's see, closed. What was closed? Implement sort filter on properties. The problem was that when you sort a list of content items, you might want to sort them on title. So the sort parameter could only accept a property name. Now you can do content.titlepart.title on a sort property. So you can sort on a sub item. Remove child scope in for loops. Chris found an issue that if in a for loop you would redefine a variable that was from the outer scope, it will not store the value. So now this is fixed. And that was last week. And if I look at in YesSql, These ones were from Sipke and someone else. So Sipke reported that you could not compare anything to null, like author equals null. You could not do that, so that is fixed. This was a bug that I introduced while doing some other bug fix. So it was the table prefix was broken. When I did offset and limit support, the table prefix was broken, so it's fixed. And this one is a bug that was reported with OpenID. The issue was that if you were doing paging but never defining an order, SQL Server doesn't support that. So now when you do paging but not defining an order, YesSql will use the ID colon of the table by default to order things, because when you page, it's always better to order. And all the fixes are going into, and that did it start? It started. Here, setup. Oh, SQLite. Okay, setup is done, so I can commit my changes to YesSql. And if I go to admin and I open a SQL query, content queries, I should go there. Design. I need to enable the module. SQL queries. Good, I found a bug. Okay, so I won't be able to show that. Crap. Give me 1 second, where is it? It's just a view issue. To optimize the code mirror editor. So query, so select star from content item index query. Okay, so it shows the query that will be run in this case in SQLite and gets all the result. The new thing is that now you can, so here we have many content items. We can do limit to get one or as many as you want. Okay, you can do offset 2, for instance. Okay, and this is not supported in SQL Server, but this will be converted in SQL Server to the correct syntax, so that will be nice. It also now supports group by and having clauses, so that's also better. The biggest change though is in the handling of parameters. So if I say where latest equals true, I can remove that because it doesn't matter. Okay. Before it used to convert true as a parameter, but it's not necessary because it's a constant, so there is no risk in injection. What it does, however, now it supports custom external parameters in the form of @isLatest, for instance. And if I do query, it says, oh, I don't know what isLatest is. and it should have added it there. It didn't. That's why I will check that. Is latest true? Query. And I can pass my parameter here, and this will be used as a parameter in the query. Okay, so the goal is that you can give a parameter a name parameter, and if you don't define it in the parameters list here in the editor, you can take them from the URL. Okay, so it will be a parameter that can be injected in the URL. So it will be user injected or from the API, and so that's why it needs to be a parameter so that there can't be any injection. Okay. Also, what we used to be able to do is something like is latest. I documented it to mention that you should not do that. You should not inject in the SQL here something that is user-based, because they can break the query completely. Or it has to be escaped, and I will provide an escape filter, but it should not be the case. If it's a parameter, it has to be done this way. Something that is supported, though, is that if it's not provided, you can define a default value. And it doesn't support things like this. Let's see if I use a number. Yeah, so I have to check that what true is not available, but you can provide a value. So if it's not supported, it will take this value. Okay. This way you don't need the parameter, but you can provide a custom thing like where equals, and then you can use strings also. Can't use true and false, but you can use strings. So there is nothing that matches that, but at least it works. So this is a new thing, new parameters, name parameters that you can pass inside the query that will be matched to the parameters in the editor here or the query string, and you can have default values. And that's it. See, global exception filter. Yeah. An error. So like the start activity that you can mark, you can say this activity starts on errors. Then done. So when there is an error, you get this activity is called, or this workflow is called, because you can start a workflow when there is an error. I don't know. If you want a global exception filter, but small errors are also fine. Good questions. Something I wanted to ask, what people think. So there is a pull request from Matteo to remove the localization part from the content types defining a default and blog recipes like pages and blog posts. So pages and blog posts have the localization part attached. So when you enable the localization module, the new translation appears for pages and blog posts, but that's only it. They don't appear for the other ones. So he says why. So first I think he was suggesting that we had localization part to all content types when we enable localization, but I don't think it's a good idea. So he's like, so let's remove them and let users add it when they want. So this is, oh, you see, add localization part to everything. This was the bug filed. This pull request removes the localization part from blog post and page by default in the recipe. I'm okay with that to be consistent, but I wanted to know what people thought about it, if you had thoughts.
So that would be an update to the recipes.
Yep.
So by default, blog posts and pages will not get the localization part?
Correct. And when you enable the localization module, then you also have to select which content types are localizable.
Right. Well, what about adding a recipe? So you could enable localization, but you could also enable it through a recipe. That if you go through the recipe, it will attach the localization part to the most commonly used types, like blog post and page, or maybe just page.
But you
if you have them, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Well, what happens if you have a recipe?
Then you need to know that this recipe is doing that, and it's. If you know that, then you might know
that could be added to the description of the recipe. But you would have to be aware of the fact that there's such a recipe, of course, in the first place.
Then you can just, at the same time, if you enable the localization module, maybe you can also know that you have to go to types and add the localization part.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that, I'm sure you could not use the module even before because it was just added to the blog post and page. So all the other ones, they don't have it. So you had to do that either way.
Mm-hmm.
So if no one sees an issue with this PR, then I will merge.
I don't see an issue with it.
Yeah, but if you have to type it in English, it's better for us. Switch your mode. Okay, thank you. Oh,
actually, I can read it. It's just yeah, exactly.
the micro, you see the micro, and interesting.
I could read it initially, and then I was like, oh, but I can't read it. I don't recognize the characters.
I don't know what magic you do, but good. Okay, I do that. Thanks. Other questions, comments? Something that came to my mind for documentation was that in some of the files we do like all of them actually. Let's say queries. So we have how the module works, what it does, and then we have extending the module, like creating query source. We have liquid templates, how to use that in liquid, how to theme the things. So theming, liquid, usage. I was thinking maybe instead of having one README, we should, if possible, have also sections in the documentation for each module, or topics like theming, like liquid, like queries if they had some query, or activities if they have custom activities for workflow. So things like this, like themed sections inside the file or in different files, so that we could build a talk that would create sections of documentation just for theming, and list the theming section for all the module. And in workflow activities, you will list all the activities section of documentation for all the modules. We don't have to do that automatically. We can just, when we create a module, update the doc to include some parts of the file or different files, and this way that will make all the liquid tags in the same page and not have to look into different modules for the liquid tags that are available. As long as we follow a specific logic to create this section, that should be better, I think. So I'm not sure if there is something that can help or someone else has ideas. Antoine, if you have more ideas.
So that's a proposal that doesn't work today.
No, today we have READMEs, and from the main talk we point to the READMEs, and then we have a menu on the left, and when we click on, let me show you. So we see each entry here is a link to a README file. So when I click on title, I see title, and I see theming for title and the view model for title. Maybe, so this makes sense, but maybe we want a section called theming, and then the sub items are title, body, list, markdown, and everything. Or a section called workflow activities, and then we can see all the activities from all the modules. But each, like the body activities, will still be in the body module. Okay. But so to have cross modules documentation instead of having indexing and everything for indexing, or queries and everything for queries, even theming and everything, or activities or whatever. So I think that will be better to, and I don't know, we have to check if we need different files for that, a specific format, or if we can have sections in the README that will be extracted from links or URLs in the talk. Like the talk could say, add in this README from this line to this line, I don't know, or this title, this paragraph. Maybe different files is better because we can have different formats. And maybe also templates for widget API, or like a workflow activity template. So if you create an activity, this is a template for the documentation of an activity, so that we can create a nice page with all the activities. Or if you have shape, this is how you make it, the view model, the default shape, and so on. That's the idea. I think it's necessary because theming or liquid tags, you don't know, well, there are liquid tags everywhere. Like here, there is one. There is that, but there should, and everywhere. Yeah, that's one idea. Okay, that's time. Thanks everyone. Thank you, Sipke, for the demo.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Bye bye. See you next week.